Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Quisha King Show, where we discuss faith, culture, and politics, all geared towards the next generation. This week, we have a very special guest for you. I think you will enjoy. Everybody, welcome Ian Pryor.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Ian, why don't you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
All right. So my name's Ian Pryor. I am a senior advisor for America First Legal and the executive director of Fight for Schools. First on America First Legal, we're a public interest litigation organization that is really trying to combat the wokeness that exists in education, in the corporate world. And we're bringing litigation on behalf of parents, on behalf of employees, former employees, to make sure that their rights are upheld, and these corporations and these school systems are held accountable to the law, which is designed to protect people's constitutional rights, not impede it. As far as Fight for Schools, that's an organization that I started up here in Loudoun County about a year and a half ago. In response to a private Facebook group that had 6 school board members that was really making an enemies list of people to plot against, to infiltrate their groups, publicly expose them, hack their websites and redirect them to critical race theory websites. Really they wanted to cancel people in their own communities. And we obviously took that seriously. We created Fight for Schools, and we started removal campaigns against school board members that were part of the group. We held rallies. We brought a lot of attention to, obviously, what was happening in Loudoun County. We had dozens of dedicated volunteers. And, I think that the movement in Loudoun County certainly played a large part in the change that we saw in November of 2021 with Governor Youngkin elected, Lieutenant Governor Sears, and Attorney General Miyares. And now, we're sitting and waiting for the results at some point of a grand investigation into Loudoun County public schools. So, there's a lot still going on here, but, all over the country, I think we're seeing, parents stand up in an attempt to take back their schools and, get some common sense back, as opposed to, politics in public education.
Absolutely. Loudoun County was like the hotbed ground for all of this stuff, and I mean, certainly I don't think anyone can deny that Loudoun County was the reason why Governor Youngkin, Sears, I'm sorry, I don't remember the Attorney General's name, but certainly the governor and lieutenant governor were elected, and just the movement of parents across the country being like, okay, what the heck is going on? So let me just ask you, what the heck is wrong with Loudoun County? Like, why are y'all, what is wrong with these people there? The ones who are like for all of this crazy woke nonsense. Like, what is up? Is it something in the water? I mean, we're still seeing stuff come out of Loudoun County that's crazy. Like, what's up with that?
Well, yeah, I think there is something in the water, and it's called the Potomac River, and it's runs right up Loudoun County and into Washington, D.C. And I think that when you come out to Northern Virginia, a couple of things. First, almost everyone here, or not almost everybody, but a significant percentage of the population here is involved in the federal government or politics. So politics is sort of it's part of every conversation. It's part of everything out here. It really is in the water. Secondly, I think you've seen a trend in places closer to Washington, Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax counties, where people have started to move out to Loudoun County because there's more space. You can get more for your money out here. So sometimes they come out here and they take their politics with them. And then you add into the fact that we've had significant growth as far as data centers, et cetera. So the population is expanding, and Loudoun County is different than it was 20 years ago. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be Fairfax. I mean, you have a population here with different interests. You have a large Asian population that are very concerned with what's going on with merit in schools. You have a large Hispanic population as well that's seeing some of the things that are happening with some of the more the social issues, the gender theory issues, and they have concerns with that as well. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next few cycles here in Loudoun County whether the move from President Trump losing by to Biden by something like 26 points to Youngkin only being 11 points behind McAuliffe, does that continue to shrink, or was that an outlier? And I think, that's something we'll
Yeah.
see this fall because we have a congressional election.
Yeah. So what are your personal thoughts on it? Do you think that it was, just kind of a move of the moment, or do you think this is a steady thing? Do you think it's something that, as far as like even November coming up, do you think it's like Republicans are definitely going to take the House and Senate? Like, are you still, is it
Yeah,
like up in the air?
I certainly think that Republicans are gonna take the House. It's really a question of what's the majority going to be like,
Hmm.
how large is it going to be. The Senate, I think, is very much a more of a competitive competitive situation.
Yeah.
I think that what happened this week with the raid on Mar-a-Lago is certainly going to impact those Senate races, and of
Hmm.
course with inflation, with gasoline prices,
Hmm.
with all of that, that's going to be on people's minds. But I think the Senate is probably pretty close
Hmm.
to Republicans taking it back, but I think
Yeah.
in the House certainly. Now, as far
Hmm.
as sort of in Loudoun County and in other places, a lot of it depends on if parents are sort of able to scale up. I see a lot of people talking as if this is only a Republican thing, and it's not, and
Right.
it can't be. And
That's
and that's
right.
one of the most important things is you need to have people that are independent. You need to have left of center Democrats, moderate Democrats
Hmm.
that are linking arms and say, I may not agree with you on your stance on abortion or immigration
Hmm.
or guns, but on this issue, we are of the same mindset, and
Yeah.
we need to move together. I mean, over in Fairfax County, I'm sure Oscar Nomani,
Yeah.
you know, she's a Democrat. We don't talk
Right.
about things like immigration and guns, et cetera, but we do talk about
Yeah.
schools, and we're very much in agreement on that. And the fact that this coalition needs to, build beyond just people on the right of center or Republicans, and really be a true coalition of parents.
Yeah, it's so funny. People, they say I mean, I am a conservative Republican. There are many of us who were in this fight. We've kind of been in this fight because of other issues as well, but this one certainly sent me, down to the school board, to voice my opinion. And that's the thing I think that the left doesn't get. They don't understand that I think they are making it more about politics than the parents for sure, because parents are like, I don't care what your political leanings are. You're not teaching my kid to be a racist. You're not transing my kid behind my back. I'm sorry. Like I don't think they understand that this is beyond politics. It's like it breaks their brain. Like they are like it's like what? They're so entrenched, probably like what you were saying, because of being right there in DC, all those people coming, like everything is so political that when it's not, they don't know how to react.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And we've had a core team of volunteers that really did the lion's share of the work last year. And not every single one of them agreed with each other's politics. There are obviously conservatives in there. There were people that really weren't political, and
Right.
don't sit there and watch cable news all night, or pay attention to everything that may be going on in Washington D.C. But when it comes to this issue, and it's so close to home, and you're dealing with school systems that exactly the idea that your kid can go to school and then claim to be the opposite sex, and the school is not going to tell you that, yet that same school needs you to sign a permission slip to give the kid Tylenol. I mean,
Right.
not only is it crazy, but it's very likely unconstitutional. It very likely violates FERPA. And that's really one of the things that America First Legal that we're looking at all across the country is making sure that in those situations, parents have that we have their backs, and that we're able to enforce their rights in a court of law.
Yeah, for sure. I tweeted a couple weeks ago that it was some story. I mean, there's always a story. Somebody pushing critical race theory, somebody trying to trans a child behind the parents' back. We see these things all the time, and even worse now. You got drag queens in schools and all of the things. And we see these things, and I tweeted one tweet I was like, well, this is against my religious rights because I am a Christian woman. And then another thing was I was like, this is against civil rights. I would love to see more legal act. I don't really understand how critical race theory can it seems obvious to me that it is against the Civil Rights Act, because you literally have to judge somebody by their skin color in order for this whole thing to work. So, I'm like, where, like, I don't think that that was, it certainly wasn't my first thought. My first thought was like, oh my God, like, what is this? I got to go out there, like, stop, just stop doing this. But the second thing is when you realize that they're not stopping, and then they're going to call you a domestic terrorist. And then you're like, okay, this is at the highest levels of government that they are for this. Seems like the next step would be, okay, let's file a lawsuit. This is against the Civil Rights Act. Maybe I'm ignorant on that, but I haven't seen a ton of lawsuits that are using the Civil Rights Act as their backup to say, you can't do this. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah,
And if I'm not, like, why do you think that is?
it's a little challenging in some ways because, for example, you've got Title VI, right? And so Title VI essentially applies the Civil Rights Act to schools.
Mm-hmm.
So for Title VI, you really have to have one of two things. Either one, a discrete action that's discriminatory. So, a kid gets punished for the same incident as somebody else didn't, and it's the same rate, different rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that situation, or it has to be essentially a hostile environment. But to be a hostile environment, it has to be pervasive. So you would have to find a student that literally they're going through this stuff at multiple levels all the time. Right now, that does exist, but it's finding those cases where you.
Yeah.
Now on the other side is Title VII. Which applies to teachers. And that, I think, is really where a lot of this stuff comes down because, we always keep hearing, well, we don't teach critical race theory. Oh, okay. As I've always said, you're not teaching it as a subject. I understand that, this is not, we've got A-level critical race theory here and B-level critical race theory here. No, but what they're doing is they're using teacher trainings to effectively infuse it into their mindset so that when they design curriculum using the resources that are recommended by the people that they pay, tens of thousands of dollars for on contract, then it will be part of the curriculum. Now, some teachers will not do it. Some teachers will do it. The question is, do teachers have to go through enough of these trainings? And I think the answer is yes, where they could say, look, this is a hostile work environment. But two, do the teachers want to, bring a lawsuit? Because once they do that, they're going to obviously, have difficulty perhaps continuing to be employed in that public school system. Obviously there's retaliation issues and whatnot, but it really takes people saying, listen, I'm willing to stand up against this and do something. And if it, ultimately costs me my job at a school, then I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, just all the way around, just different things that are going on, not just in the schools, but in America as a whole, where you have so many people that are afraid, to stand up. And our government was never meant to function that way. Like, we are literally doing everything that our founding fathers did not want to happen. Like, the government was supposed to be to fear the citizens, not for us to fear, the government, and everything. It's just like flipped upside down. And so it does create an environment where people are in fear of standing up to do what is right. That is so, it's, no matter how many times I see this, no matter how many times I talk about this, it still blows my mind that, we have become kind of a society where you are afraid. And I understand that fear, I certainly do. I mean, for me, I'm just set up a little bit differently. Like, you can't have my kid. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I will go and eat bread and potatoes in a shack, before you have I'll give up the house, I'll give up the car. I'm sorry. My kid is off limits. And but I do understand that. What would you say? You've been in this fight, you see what's going on. What do you say to parents, teachers, people who are like, I don't know, it's hard for me to go out there and say what's true. What do you say to that?
I think I've always said that this, as a parent, is the fight of your life. I mean, it really is. And, you're never going to have a more consequential impact than you will right now. And sort of that is what, gets me up and inspired me certainly last year and into this year, which is, you always want to have a purpose. You always want to have a cause. And everybody does. And it's what that cause is. And, you can, you can go to work and you can kind of ignore what's going on and just say, oh, it's never going to affect me. But that
Mhm.
unfortunately is why we've gotten to this point
Right.
is malaise. And, even people that work in the school systems, even people that work in the government, they may not necessarily have these evil intentions, but
Mhm.
these things permeate through the system. And by the time it's, people realize what's happened, it's, wow, how did we let this happen?
Yeah.
And it's important for people to stand up and be civic minded, and to do it the right way. My take has always been, elected officials, public school officials are fair game for what they do and what they
Mhm.
say in their
Yeah.
role as a taxpayer funded employee or representative. But
Yeah.
personal attacks and attacks on appearances and attacks, attacking them at their workplace, and that's not how you get it done.
Right. No, I agree. I totally agree. So I know you've seen this already. But speaking of like people who, if you don't stand up now, like you're not going to be prepared for what comes later. Like if we don't do something now, it's going to get worse. So, we've seen the whole thing like where you can't say the word groomer, can't say that, Ian, can't say that anymore. But in my opinion, I see a lot of these so let me just start here. So the LGBTQ like support, we have that support guide. I think it's in a lot of uh, school administrations across the country. And what these guides, what they say is they have, you don't have to tell the parents if the child comes to you and says that they want to be called something else. They can socially transition them without the parents' knowledge. To me, I do believe that some bad people who, regardless, would have been doing bad things to children, but this gives them kind of cover to do those bad things and just say, well, like, I don't know, this is what this is. I can do this. And recently there was a counselor in Pennsylvania who came out and who was talking about minor attracted persons, MAPS, and basically those are pedophiles. And so I find it hard to believe that there would be people who would be so so audacious to say like, yeah, pedophiles are being discriminated against. I do think that this has something to do with how we have become a society that is sort of saying, okay, well, you can identify as a boy if you're a girl, or a girl if you're born a boy. And so do you think that's just kind of coincidence? Do you think it's like, do you think there's a there? Do you like, what do you think
That
about
is
that?
a great question, and I constantly wonder about that. Is how did we get to this point, right? I mean, how did we
Mhm.
get to this point where a kid can go to school and say, "Well, I identify as a cat," and that puts me in the quote queer bucket. So you now need to
Yep.
affirm my identity as a cat,
Mhm.
and everybody else needs to affirm that as well, or
They'll
they're
put cat litter in the school for you. They'll do that.
It's
Uh-oh.
just, I
Yeah.
mean, this is not something that 20 years ago people would have thought was normal. 10 years ago, how did it all of a sudden just become? And I don't know if it was partly because of COVID and people are stuck online and they're being fed information through social media. But if
Yeah.
I were a foreign power, I certainly would be pushing this stuff in the United States because it is
Mhm.
divisive.
Yep.
It is certainly not a majority opinion out there that
Right.
kids should be able to get sex reassignment surgery at whatever 13, 14, 15 years old, should be taking puberty blockers or testosterone. But
Yeah.
somehow it has permeated our society, and it's
Yeah.
happening. You saw what happened in Boston Children's Hospital. They're
Mhm.
talking about how they're the preeminent gender affirming care facility, which let's be honest, that is puberty blockers, it's
Right.
testosterone, it's surgery for
Mhm.
children. They
Yeah.
can dress it up however they want to dress it up, but this is money behind this.
Yeah.
And the
For
question is,
sure.
why is it happening? Why is it happening now? And I think that hopefully we start to get some answers in the next congressional season when there's a new Congress in town.
Yeah, I definitely, I agree. You know, you tweeted recently, let's see if I can get this pulled up here. Let's see, let me share my screen. Where's my window? You tweeted this here. Hold on, let me see if it's not. Can I do it like this? Hold on, Ian. I'm trying to get us both. Okay, there we go. So this says, this was Equality Loudoun. If even a handful of children could be harmed by abusive parents, then to intentionally out a child would be cruel. If your child can't trust you enough as their parent to tell you, then that's a you problem. And then they went on to say, oh goodness, how do I do this? I'm new at this, Ian. Bear with me. Then they went on to say, if parents have a right to know their child's LGBTQ plus status, then they should talk to their child. If a child doesn't feel safe telling their parents, that is a red flag that a child feels unsafe in their family. If you aren't a safe place for your child, that's on you.
Right. Yeah. So I mean,
Like, what? I
so
just, this just really quick, like, this is again, like, I would never have expected a group, an organization, whatever, to be so bold to say something like this. Like, that is ridiculous. Okay, go ahead.
well, not only that, but at least at the time of that tweet, the person listed on their organization as being responsible for their social media is running for school board in Loudoun County. Is a 22-year-old that's running as a Democrat endorsed candidate, and he
Mhm.
certainly seems to support that. But I mean, the logic is crazy. So if a parent doesn't agree, or they'd be concerned that the parent might be mad, you shouldn't tell them. Well, what if the kid is addicted to heroin? What if the
Right.
kid is suicidal?
Mhm.
Where do you not tell the parents? At what
Right.
point? There are a lot of things that kids aren't going to tell their parents. That
Right.
doesn't mean the parents don't have a right to know, and,
Right.
to proactively have a policy that says it's the kid that has the right to say whether the parents get to know or not. So if a 7-year-old who, through a variety of things, maybe they've been indoctrinated watching videos on
Yeah.
YouTube, or they're looking at their friends who changed their genders, and they say, okay, well, in school I'm going to all of a sudden call myself a boy, but I
Right.
don't want my parents to know. Well, so that 7-year-old has the right above the parent to know how the school is referring to their child, and
Yeah.
what's going on in the schools. I mean, that sounds like a 14th Amendment violation of parental
Mhm.
rights, but two, it also sounds like a FERPA violation. Parents own the right to inspect or student records, not the student
Mhm.
until the student becomes an adult. So if you are now hiding things, that you're writing down at school from parents, that's a violation
Mhm.
of FERPA.
Yeah. So explain what FERPA is to
Yeah,
everyone.
it's I don't know the full term. I'll mess it up. But it's essentially it's the Privacy Act, right? It's the Federal
Mhm. Mhm.
Privacy Act where student records, parents have access to student records. Schools can do certain things with student records. They have to maintain them a certain way, but
Mhm.
parents ultimately have the right to have access to those student records because it's
Mhm.
their child. So,
Yes.
for instance, if you've got a assistant principal writing down records or putting in emails where they're discussing a kid's gender transition or whatnot, or putting in any kind of records, if you're hiding that from the parent who has the right to view those records, that's a violation.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, Ian. So I, people will call me a conspiracy theorist for this, but whatever. I don't care. All right. So are you going to put on your tinfoil hat with me
Sure.
for a second? Okay. So I have come to the conclusion, because I've never seen such force of an issue on children. I mean, we have never taken an approach like this towards children. Children have always been to be protected. They have always been at the forefront of those most vulnerable who need protections, parents and the government. We've never just done any, been so forceful towards children, to put something on children. So I believe that this is on purpose at this point. I can no longer say this is just, it's just a few, it's just a coincidence. It's just, I think that this is on something that is being done on purpose to eventually weaken America. I do. That's my tinfoil hat. I
Well,
I
yeah. I
I
mean,
I I can no longer like, okay, why are we now that it's exposed, certainly those who are involved in politics are very aware of it. I understand the people who aren't really, on Twitter and they don't live in this bubble like we do. um I don't know how else to explain it, Ian. What, like, I do. I think it's on purpose. Am I
well,
crazy?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, how much does a gender reassignment surgery cost? How much are companies making when testosterone is being used off label, or Lupron is being used
Mhm.
in these situations? I mean, they're making money,
Yeah.
so there's
Oh,
there's
yeah.
always going to be a financial advantage, and you always have to follow the money. And as I said
Mhm.
earlier, I don't know this, but if I were a rival nation like a Russia or North Korea or China,
Mhm.
creating social unrest in America where you have such freedoms, especially now with social media. I mean, we've seen it before that they do this. They do this kind of
Yeah, that's
thing.
true.
Whether they're doing this here, I don't know, but it certainly has shown. It has created cracks in our society and our culture. And I wouldn't be surprised to see other places and other powers exploiting that in some ways.
Yeah. So when I went viral when I was talking about critical race theory and going down to the Florida Board of Education and basically saying, okay, if you really think that you're going to tell my kid that because they're black, they are permanently oppressed, like I got a problem with that. And if you're going to tell little white kids that, they are permanently oppressors, I got a problem with that too. To me, that's racism. You can't, we don't do that in America. We have drawn a clear line in the sand through the Civil War. That's not the country that we want to be. That, in our founding documents, we're always pressing towards a more perfect union. So clearly, a more perfect. So clearly, the acknowledgement was there that we ain't perfect, and to me, we never. That's a lofty goal that we will never achieve perfection. We won't. But I can accept America as she is, and I know that this is the best country to live in. And so when I was looking at critical race theory and understanding this and realizing how much it was in the school and so embedded, because it's new to us, but it's
Mhm.
old to them. They've been doing this for a very long time. And so I started looking into American education and where it came from. So do you know about Prussia and how the American public school system came to be? Are you familiar?
A little bit, but probably
Okay.
not as much as you're going to tell me.
Well, Prussia is a small little country. They don't exist anymore. They've been moved into, I think, Germany now or Russia. I always forget Germany or Russia, one of them. And they started this mass compulsory education, and basically they wanted to dumb down the children, kill the imagination, and create minions for the state, just people who would do whatever the state tells them to do. And so I didn't understand why or how something like a critical race theory could get into America, because it's so antithetical to what we believe, like as a nation. Like, I know our history, but still, as a nation as a whole, like, you can see that we were constantly trying to move away from that in so many ways. And I didn't understand, this thing like a critical race theory coming in. But when you understand Prussia and you understand how that system works and you can see it come into America, you can map critical race theory and these types of divisive total dependency on the state, whatever the state says, the experts. You can see that map critical race theory right on top of it. I was fascinated by, I still am fascinated by these Americans who went over to Prussia to learn this system and brought it back to America, like Horace Mann, they call him the founder of the American compulsory education system. They were drawn to this. Here's my question: why do you think a country like America and these scholars were so drawn to something like a compulsory mass education system, where we now have these the public school system that is just utterly terrible? I'm talking about from the academics to the social agendas, to the bullying that goes on, to the drugs and I mean, it is like when you send your kid to a public school nowadays, it's like you're sending them into a not good place. So, I mean, let's just talk, like, what do you think about that? Why do you think America was kind of drawn to that? It's weird to me.
So I think, it just kind of putting the dots together, especially we're talking about Prussia, right? And,
Mhm.
Prussia was obviously a small principality, which is
Mhm.
now in Germany, but it was very warlike, right? And
Yeah.
they're focused on industry. They
Mhm.
would go out, they fought wars with the Denmark, they fought wars with Austria, with
Yep.
France, and they eventually unified what then became Germany and
Mhm.
created a warlike state that had the resources to wage war, which meant industrial power.
Yeah.
So, having a school system that is very sort of methodical and factory like
Mhm.
would have
Mhm.
helped theoretically in as our nation is going from an agrarian one into primarily an industrial one. So it
Right.
sounds like that's probably, if we're talking about from Prussia to America, we're looking
Yeah.
at sort of industrial revolution and growing out of that agrarian nation that we were, which obviously we have since, we are no longer that.
Right.
But as with anything, I think when you see things that become bigger and bigger and bigger, and the responsibility of, in this case, the federal government's involvement, state government's involved, local government's involved, you create a massive bureaucracy,
Mhm.
as many people call it, the educational industrial complex. And,
Yeah.
the more that you take away local control from parents and from the community, you're going to have this problem where things are getting into the curriculum, things are getting into the school system.
Yeah.
Parents don't know what's happening because they don't really have a say. Sure, they can
Right.
go to the school board meeting and speak for a minute or 2 minutes, but those school
Mhm.
board members, I mean, look, school board members are divided into like four kinds of people. You've got one, the political climbers. Okay, they're
Mhm.
going to the school board, they're getting elected, and they're going to move up to higher office. Then you got
Yeah.
your true sort of radicals, people that really do believe everything they're pushing on you. And then you got the people that I think went there for the right reasons, but they've
Mhm.
sort of been beaten down by categories 1 and 2. And then
Yeah.
finally, you have that fourth version, which is people that are there for the right reasons and are actually sticking to their guns and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, it's really populated with, I think, 1 and 2 lately,
Mhm.
and some degree of 3. And that's why when you go to school board meetings expecting to get things done because you elected them to represent you, they're just there to rubber stamp what comes from the administration, and what comes
Yep.
from the administration are the consultant documents, the consultant reports, the plans from the Department of Education, most of which you're paying with your tax dollars.
Yep. For sure. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I never thought about it like that before, but the four categories, that I mean, that's certainly what I've seen. You are spot on. I like that. You're spot on with that. That's definitely true. I think the true believers and these political climbers, I mean, they will, I'm not sure which one is worse. The political climbers, they'll sell you out so fast, so quick, tell you anything to get the seat, and then they really don't care. And then, but the true believers are the crazy ones. Like they're the ones that will, like, they're crazy, like psychotic crazy. So yeah, but I like the way you put that. That I think that'll help parents get a really good perspective on what to look for when they are talking to school board members, so they can make better judgments and have a real expectation of what the outcome will be after talking to these school board members once you identify who the type that you're talking to. So staying on this track, what do you think about school choice? There's been a lot of like back and forth, online about school choice. I pulled my kids out. I'm homeschooling my children. I was like, I'm done. I said we needed a mass exodus from the public school system. I still stand by that. I think it is rotten to the core. I think that the Department of Education needs to be abolished. That's my personal opinion. Um, but there is a concern that school choice, we're just going to get more of this indoctrination stuff, and it can get in where it can pull the government into like homeschooling. What are your thoughts on school choice?
Well, I think that school choice is not a panacea. right? It's not going to cure everything that is wrong with the public school system.
Right.
On the other hand, the problem is this: think about all those parents out there who they're really trapped. They're paying their taxes, which go to
Yep.
fund public schools. They don't have enough money to then send their kid to a private school or a Christian school or a religious school,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't maybe have the time to invest in homeschooling. So
Yeah.
now, I mean, they're trapped. They're literally trapped in the public school system. So
Right.
school choice is a way to, open up that trap so that,
Mhm.
parents as, the zip code issue, right? Well, all I ever hear about is we need equity so that, you're not governed or your life isn't governed by your zip code. Okay,
Right.
well, then they should be for school choice so that somebody in any zip code can go to any school that they want to. That would
That's
certainly
right.
change things so that their lives aren't determined by their zip code.
Mhm.
But certainly, I get the fact that once you start having that money flow out to parents, it can influence and expand the reach of the government into
Mhm.
schools and what they need to teach. So any kind of school choice would have to be very carefully designed uh,
Absolutely.
with laws that prevent that from happening. Of course, we all know that the federal government likes to regulate away laws through things like their Title IX revisions here.
Mhm.
But it's something that has to be done very carefully because it could
Yeah.
obviously backfire in certain circumstances.
No, I totally agree. I understand the argument. I definitely understand the concern and the fear, if we want to use that word, that the government would just come into these to homeschooling or just do what they do, overreach. Um, but I can't see, I was that parent, I was newly separated. I, was living in a new neighborhood. My child was really struggling in school as a special needs child at that. And if school choice was not available to me, I don't even know what I would have done, Ian. Like,
Right.
I am so thankful that I was able to take that option. My baby was nonverbal for years and in school only. When she got in the car, I mean, she would blabber away, but in school she was nonverbal. The very first day of her private school, she whispered in class. It was like a miracle. Like, no one could believe it. It was just such a blessing to our family. Like, I don't know what we would have done. And so I think, like, when we're saying you have to, it's homeschool or nothing else. I think you're leaving parents with like an untenable option there. That is no option. That's basically, for some, that is no option. They're just gonna be stuck in the public school. And while I have a strong concern of the government overreach and school choice, I have a very strong concern too of those kids who are being trapped in the public school system, and then they go on to university, and then they become the legislators, the
Yeah.
teachers, the administrators, and then now we have more woke kids. It's like I don't want to I don't want any more woke anybody.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem. You can't just say we're gonna just pull everybody out, or you're gonna necessarily pull your kid out. But then what about the 90% of the kids that stay in public schools, right? I mean, these are going to be the
Yeah.
same people that your kids are working with. These are going to be the leaders in the community. These are going to be elected officials.
Mhm.
So it's not enough to just say, well, if we have school choice, then people can leave and go to private school. Most people will still probably stay in public schools. So it's
Mhm.
not, I don't think it's a realistic option just to say, school choice is the cure all. It is a valuable tool in
Oh, you
recalibrating
were
the
you
education
you were
system in this
breaking up.
country. But you
You
cannot
were breaking
leave.
up for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's a
You
valuable
said
tool
school
in
choice
recalibrating
is not the
education.
cure all.
Yeah, it's not the cure all, but it's a valuable tool in recalibrating
Mhm.
education in America. But public schools
Mhm.
need to be fixed and rebalanced as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can't bring myself to say, and I run into, friends of mine, that's a contention that we have, we're kind of going back and forth on that because they're just like, no, no, we can't do school choice. But I'm like, okay, well, then we're going to get more of the same. We do like that's what we are saying when we leave parents with no options. And I think the parents who are trying to pull their kids out and trying to find an option, they are going to be the ones who are looking to put their kids in a non-woke school and have just getting a academic good academic education focused on academics. They are going to be those parents who are who pay attention to those things a bit more. So yeah, I agree. Mass exodus or school choice or whatever you want to call it, that was just what came to me at the moment. It was just like,
I think I was there. Was that might have been in Loudoun when you said
oh
that?
yes, that is right. That
Came
is right.
on right after.
I could not believe the response. The entire room stood up for like 20 seconds. You just see me. I was like, oh, wow. I'm like holding the mic. I'm like, wow, I could not believe it. But we're just at that point, we're like, okay, the federal government is telling me that I'm a domestic terrorist because I care about my kid. Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
And, what are we going to do? So, yeah, I said the thing, I guess, that wasn't supposed to be said, but whatever. I do believe it. I stand by that. But as we wrap up here, why don't you tell everyone what you're working on and where they can find you and what you got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're at America First Legal specifically. I mean, like I said earlier, we're looking to, help parents in court throughout the country. I mean, we've got a couple of good cases right now. One of them involves Loudoun County Public Schools. There's another one up in the city of Philadelphia and their school system. Again, we're gonna make things about zip code to really disguise the fact that this is actually about race.
Mm-hmm.
Which is how they do it. That's how they did it here in Fairfax with Thomas Jefferson High School. We've got another case outside of Philadelphia where this one's really interesting. A parent by the name of Ben Auslander filed a right to know request in Pennsylvania for his school system, the Tredyffrin Easttown school system. He was allowed to go in and inspect curriculum materials and teacher trainings, but he was told he couldn't photocopy them. He couldn't take pictures of them. So what he did was he started taking voice notes and they kicked him out. So we brought a lawsuit on his behalf. He's suing for First Amendment violations by the school system. But as part of that, they had to produce the documents, and the document production was it's 166 pages worth of Pacific Educational Group documents, which I mean, there was no clearer evidence that critical race theory is being used to change the educational system than these documents. I mean, it was all over the place. A lot of the time, they disguise it as equity or culturally responsive training or learning.
Yeah.
Not in this document. It was critical race theory. Here's why it's important. Here's why it's
Wow.
schools. Let's talk about the permanence of racism. Let's talk about whiteness. Let's talk about all the things that we know critical race theory to be. And then the other thing we're doing is helping parents with Protection of People Rights Amendment requests. A lot of people will rely on Freedom of Information Act. So they'll send Freedom of Information Act requests to their schools, and maybe they get documents back. Maybe they get a $48,000 or $37,000 quote for those documents.
Right.
Under the PPRA, you can submit a request to the school system to inspect instructional materials, which includes lesson plans, curriculum, teacher trainings, et cetera. And the school has to allow you to do that. It is federal law. And if they don't do that, then they can, you can file a complaint with the Department of Education.
Yeah.
We're really focused on that. And then, here in Loudoun County, I think that, we're kind of sitting there and waiting to see what happens with this grand jury investigation. They've been at it, I believe, since April. The school system actually tried to shut down the grand jury with a civil case, civil injunction, and fortunately, the court, summarily dismissed that. I don't think that the arguments were compelling to the judge at all. So, that is very much on the horizon. And, we've tried to get to the bottom of a lot of things that have happened here with a great degree of success. But certainly, we don't have subpoena power. We don't have the ability to bring people in to testify.
Right.
And so we are certainly waiting on the results of that, and hopefully that, justice will be served here.
Well, good. Well, I will put all of your links in the description box below. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Ian Pryor. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, comment, share this video so people can know what's going on, and subscribe. And if you are listening via podcast, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you give us a 5-star rating or give us whatever rating that your podcast has. Thank you so much, Ian, for coming on the show and informing us of what's going on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll see you later. Bye bye.